All right, I'm calling the meeting to order at 6:05. You look on your agenda. We're going to go directly to 5B, Strategic Planning Pillar Roundup Presentation.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks for being here. Here we are again. Having a lot of work over the last couple of months, so thank you. I want to make sure you know that we're being live streamed, so anything you say might be picked up, so be careful. And also, Danae Marana, right back here, is our minutes taker, and she may not know some of you, so if you are speaking, please make sure that she knows who you are, and then we can help with the spelling later on, but for the most part, just make sure people know who people are. Okay? Before we start, I'm going to give you all about 5 minutes, and here's what the 5 minutes is for. I'd like you to figure out who's presenting from your group, and I think there are still groups that are not sure. You have a chance to use the computer. You can speak. You can pass something out, however you'd like to do it. I would also, in 5 minutes, take a volunteer of which group might want to go first. And then the purpose of tonight is for all the groups to see all the work that people have done. And also I want you to know you're not going to be graded on what you've done, what you haven't done, because all the work is going to come to me. And from this moment on, a group tonight or two groups tonight may say, we've got a little bit more work to do. And if you do, I'd like you to set a time, but I'd like you to have me there. I'd like to make sure I can help you finish so we can do the next part of the work, which is February and March. We'll come back here again at the March SAU board meeting on March 31 to share with you a really large vision of what's going to happen. A couple of reasons for that. I'm waiting. We have to vote on March 10th. So budgets are right now, we're not sure. And I should say this too. I want everybody tonight to take a deep breath. There's a lot of work going on the last 2 weeks and the coming week about budgets and all of this. Do yourself a favor, take a deep breath. We're only doing strategic planning tonight. I want to make sure that everybody knows that. And I do thank you very, very much. You've seen my letters to you guys for your help and assistance in this program and this plan. I would like to introduce Lisa D'Ambrosio right here. Some of you know Lisa. You can clap for her, too. Right? Lisa is the finance director for the town of Amherst. She used to work in the Brick School and is finishing up her advanced degree to become a superintendent. And she is working with us. You might see her in different venues to kind of pick up some things that we're all doing. So this is Lisa, so thank you for being here. Any other housekeeping ideas that I'm forgetting or anything else? Okay.
You said March 10th?
Yeah.
It's March 8th. So
I'm sorry. March 8th for the people at home and the people here. Okay, so it is 6:10 at 6:20. I'm sorry, at 6:15. Math, yeah. We'll start. So take 5 minutes to make sure you know who's presenting, what you're presenting, and then I'd like a volunteer to start. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. I'm going to have a difficult one presenting because I couldn't figure out where the last
There's no expectations.
yeah.
There first.
I put some stuff in.
First and second. Right. First and second.
Gigi, Alice,
Viewers.
and me.
So
Yeah, they're all captured
Right.
there. But
Let's get this done.
yeah, I know.
How are your kids?
But
Oh, they're all good.
I know she revised it. I can't
I'm really
hear the
worried.
captions
Sit down.
in my head.
I'm really very concerned about what's
We
there.
added a lot of stuff.
His wife just went. I should force him out of the house.
Do you feel comfortable with this, Anthony? Or?
Out of the blue. Out of the blue.
Peggy decided to,
Sounds
she
to
did
me
give me
like she
some
was
feedback
out
on
in the
what I
front.
sent last night, but she decided that she's no longer
Or at the very least, something pretty close approximation of the
She
thing.
said to keep her on the distribution.
No,
list,
someone
she
she was
kind of
working
wants
with in
to keep the
Nashville, I think.
updates and everything on how we're doing.
And she just like unloaded all this on him like 2 weeks ago.
Correcting papers.
You're going to get
Page 11.
okay.
Oh my gosh, the kids in her class have so much fun.
Yeah, but they do a lot of work.
I already had another teacher come to me today and say, I have a student
Yeah,
I want to
it's
put in
too
the
busy.
analysis class, but I know she always is.
So
Yeah.
You know who's saying
I can do a summary.
doing some kind of same thing as Amy was doing. Where were you and Jim going to go tonight?
You're not talking.
What were you and Jim going to do?
Just talking about it. You're not talking.
Was it? Yeah.
Right.
At the policy meeting, you guys were talking about
Chart's up there. You're talking just what the chart is. You're not adding anything.
something to do with
Keep me
classes.
getting away.
Was it
Oh,
something to do with classes down?
Gigi,
I
you
like that.
I
Yeah.
know the
Gigi, if you
become a
want to do
permanent
those final
position.
slides, you want to just do those,
Yeah.
and we'll just jump in with
that
each
where
other.
Jim is?
But I'll start.
right. That's something.
Yeah,
It wasn't
I'm sorry.
something initially that I didn't remember reading
Yeah.
all this. Things
So is there anything that you want us to mention, that wasn't on the
we don't have a lot.
anybody?
So
I didn't want to use all the color because I put it on that blue background, so I said, forget it. No, I shared it with Christine. It's on her laptop. Yeah. It's already brought up, so we're good.
Oh, it's on her laptop.
You know what I was trying to do was put it on OneDrive. I know I've done that before, but I couldn't do it. I tried this morning to share it with you guys.
Yeah, you said.
Oh well. Do you know how to do it? Yeah. I know I've done it because we have a few kids that we kind of communicate that way with, but somebody else set it up. So all I have to do is OneNote.
Is that Christine's computer that's hooked up?
Yes. Yeah. And she's got it, and it came through all right. I checked it everywhere.
Now you want me to do it one piece at a time? So are the slide time changed from what you sent?
I'm trying to think, did we send the final? No, Gigi sent the final one, right? And I think I made a couple of minor changes, but very minor.
Yeah, we were on it at the same time. We actually realized. So while I was making 2 more slides, Meg was tweaking the first one.
part of your
I actually made slides after you.
I wasn't sure you were here. I thought I just heard your voice.
I do have to find out again and write down the steps, though, and how to do that. Put it in my class.
We've been producing
Oh, really?
I migrated those something actually.
You did?
Probably during our class change. That's, I think, why they wanted to do this first, so that these people could leave.
It's not these days?
I've got 392 people.
Oh, you in trouble?
And you know, the elephant in the room.
Oh, because of school?
I read a page of it yet, but it's all in there.
I know, it's amazing.
We know how big How's he doing? What grade is Ben in now? Is he really? Oh my gosh, I recognize him. What about Olivia? 6?
Yes, what's that? Will you fill your spot?
7.
Probably have one minute. That's the goal.
Oh my goodness.
They're going to fire somebody. I wonder because of I've got thoughts on it.
I know that microphone was nice.
Yeah, is he all right?
It's always good to have somebody else. Jim retires already. Maybe you'll retire someday. Somebody's take over.
So you said, no, I have one, and I was on him to get it, the guy. So now I gotta get back on this.
Probably have it as a major
Wow.
Hey.
What do you live in this building? Just about.
Oh, yeah, Ben actually looks the same. He does. And Olivia, too. She's still got her nice long blonde hair. Oh, wow. I think when you came here, Ben was coming into 3rd grade, was it? Yeah, I remember. These kids. Gosh, I don't remember.
Alex Craven.
Hold
on.
Yeah, he's a Simba
Because you're facing the wrong way, but you can't ever really. Correcting them for whatever you decide to everybody. So we
And one last bit of housekeeping. Make sure you have a microphone wherever you're speaking, because people don't want to hear you otherwise. Okay? And you push it in, it should be green instead of red. That's the box on the bottom.
All right. Do you guys mind? Okay. Can you hear me now? Oh, okay.
It makes it so people can hear you.
All right, thank you. Okay, appreciate it. Good evening, everybody. For those of you who I haven't met, I'm Meg Traynor, one of the assistant principals at Clark Wilkins Elementary School, and I have a couple colleagues up here.
Alice Paquette, 3rd grade teacher at Wilkins School. Gigi Klippa, Dean of Faculty, Sauhegan High School.
And the rest of our Unite group is seated over here at this table. We have Kathy White and Paul Prescott and Rick Katzenberg. Jerry St. Amand is also part of our group, and he was unable to be here tonight. I thought I would, I'm sorry.
And Peg Silva.
Oh, and Peg Silva and Sarah. Is Sarah here?
Yeah, Sarah Lawrence.
I didn't see her yet. Sarah Lawrence also. I thought I'd start off with a nice picture of the SAU and our mission statement, which is to engage, challenge, and support all learners. And when we say all learners, I thought it would be nice to kind of keep us grounded in who we're talking about. We're talking about those we most value, our children. So there's some Sauhegan High School students. These are some 4th graders who just competed in the Scripps National Spelling Bee. They were excited to do so. So the charge of our group Unite was to adopt an SAU-wide unified philosophy that would allow all students to reach their full potential. I will tell you just up front that our group did definitely struggle a little bit because it's something that's so huge that we were trying to distill down and put into kind of a to-do list, a task list. So I'm not sure that it's as fine-tuned as it eventually will be, but this is what it is. One of the most important things for Unite was that we develop a set of core values. In the strategic plan, you'll see on page 5 that we do have some core values listed. And then in addition to that, each of the schools has either principles or values that they have. They're all different, but we think it's a good idea for us to look at them all and maybe come up with a few that we all agree upon and go forward so that the kids kind of have some shared and common language, and also the community and what we truly value in education. I listed some resources up there. One I hadn't mentioned was the New England Association of Schools and Colleges, or NEASC. Gigi Klipper had accessed that information, and we think that would be a good resource. They have some of this work It's maybe even a little bit bigger than we want it, but we can use that as a reference tool. We do want to make sure that going forward, personalized learning is an emphasis of the Unite Committee and of the Strategic Planning Committee and the Strategic Plan. Personalized learning in that each student really has the opportunity to excel given their own strengths and weaknesses. Another piece that we want to make sure we incorporate is active citizenship. Each of the schools really already has some endeavors that have been long-standing or recently underway that promote that, but we want to emphasize the importance of that active citizenship. Down at the bottom you'll see it was hard to put it on a timeline because the timeline, of course, will be informed by the other pillars and the priorities and things like that, but we thought if we could begin in the summer, we could present at least a draft to all stakeholders, including the students and the community, by September.
I was just going to add, I think the thing, and it'll be interesting to see if the rest of you struggled with getting started, was that we weren't sure if we were supposed to do the work or we were creating a list for other people to do the work. So we kept going back and forth like, oh, well, we'll do this and we'll do this. No, we're not doing that. We have to create a roadmap or a plan. We don't have to do the work. So we have to keep reminding ourselves of that. But in the end run, it looks like there may be some work that we'll decide to take on to kind of just begin a draft and then move it and broaden it out to others.
And there's a picture of AMS students all saying hello to us. SAU-wide standards. These are some things that really are underway already, really statewide. So Sauhegan High School has been very heavily involved in the PACE work, performance assessment, and competency-based learning. AMS is involved quite a bit this year. Clark Wilkins, we're just getting introduced to it, and we'll be jumping on board next year. And that will be competencies for career and college readiness across the state of New Hampshire. So it's an opportune time to work on unifying this across our schools. The PACE work also includes a work-study practices. They've already defined the ones that you see up there: self-direction, collaboration, creativity, and communication. And again, those will be for all students statewide. So each of us have had opportunities to send staff members to participate in developing those competencies. And the staff members came back quite excited about shared competencies across the state. So it's all good work. That work will eventually inform a common reporting system. Again, it will probably be a statewide reporting system based on the competencies that we all agreed upon. So that work hasn't started yet, but it will be completed as a result of the academic and the work-study practices. We have some Mount Vernon students, some little L's for you. Reflecting and aligning, I'll just start it, and then Gigi's going to kind of expand upon it a little bit. We just thought, after talking for a while, there are a lot of things that we really already have in common at the schools, but we really have never inventoried what we do the same, what we do different, and try to align it. I want to just make sure I emphasize, too, and Gigi and I were talking about it on the way in, is the goal is not for us all to be the same, because it wouldn't be appropriate, it wouldn't be developmentally appropriate either, but it's just to be aligned and allow students a somewhat shared experience, and parents as well. So we're going to take a look at the current practices, and I listed some of them up there for your review, and again, Gigi will expand upon those, and then see where the gaps are and how we need to close those. And for a timeline within 1 year.
So we spent a lot of time at our last meeting talking about what are potential next steps, like how do we go about trying to inventory what everybody does that already unites us or are similar practices. And so we decided that maybe it would be helpful to use a lens that would give us some guiding tools to look at the schools and practices. So we talked about the NEASC accreditation standards, not every school gets accredited, but it's a good set of standards. It's a great tool to kind of like comb through your practices. So we thought that maybe a group, and perhaps it would be our committee, would identify a first draft of all the commonalities that exist among the schools. It would probably be a very rough first draft, but then we would build that out. The second step would be a committee or staff from each school would identify what commonalities that might have been missed in that first draft, as well as any inequities that they saw that should be addressed. And then what we would do after that is we would develop action plans to close the gaps, to find consensus where we might need consensus, and or to address any inequities. And then these are just a list of the standards so you can see the lenses. So these would be the lenses that we would use. And again, it's not that we're married to this lens. We could think of other ways to look, but this just gave us a nice list so that we can ask ourselves the question, what are we all doing instructionally the same way? You know, we had a big literacy institute this summer, and at that literacy institute, everybody used a template to begin to design learning progressions for their content areas. And so that's one thing that unites us instructionally. And then, you know, in terms of the other things, curriculum, community resources, I don't have to give a ton, but that's kind of the idea. The idea is we use those lenses in order to look at, here's the things that we have in common amongst all the schools.
So just in conclusion, Unite is about our mission statement, engaging, challenging, and supporting all learners. Our number one goal is to improve student achievement, and of course to allow each and every student to reach their full potential, like this guy. Anybody have any questions or comments? Yes?
The active citizenship, did you guys discuss what you were seeing in that?
Yeah, so for active citizenship, really at each building there are things already going on about active citizenship, but I'll give you some Clark Wilkins examples. We donate to share. Throughout the year we have different, I'm trying to think of what some of the other ones are. We do the animal shelter donations, those kinds of things, to just get the kids, even at that young age, to see beyond themselves, and that they are indeed part of our community, and that they can have an impact, even with something as small as, you know, a jar of peanut butter or a roll of paper towels.
Yeah. At the high school, we just came off a huge kind of drive over the holidays. I think we had 31 advisories who serviced, I can't remember who donated, whether it be toys or family baskets, to I don't know how many families. Service is kind of an underlying theme at the high school. We have a community service program. Students have community service as part of their graduation requirement. So.
All right. I don't know, Porter, if you wanted to comment on the middle school.
I think the same thing. We spend a lot of time, as much as we can, having our children get involved. Lots of fundraisers over the years, all the way going back to we raised almost $30,000 for Katrina victims and the tsunami in Southeast Asia, and then since then we've been supporting the veterans outreach at the VA hospital up in Manchester for a few years now, and we have a not-so-secret service club, and we just incorporated the Junior National Honor Society, which has with it a requirement, just like the high schools does, all community service that's involved with that, and service in general, not sort of community service, but that, and citizenship.
I thought of one that's going to be happening pretty soon at Clark Wilkins that you might be interested in. Our fourth graders, some of our fourth graders are doing a unit on economics, and through that unit they've each started their own companies. They've purchased materials and they're making their own bracelets. And they had to figure out, you know, how much they actually cost and how much profit they'll be. And they each wanted to donate a portion of their products, that was all of their own volition, to some kind of charitable organization. So we chose the Jimmy Fund because we have students and staff who have benefited from the Jimmy Fund and all the great things that they do. So that'll be coming soon.
Third graders. They're doing, at Christmas when, the kids are all about getting, they, two of the classes took on a project to make dog toys for the Animal Rescue League. So it became part of their Christmas party, is they made these toys and gave them out, and it was such a success. I know that Betsy Kellendorfer wants to try to lead that in the spring to go along with her drive for the animal shelter for all the third grades.
Anybody else? Thank you.
Well, I have a free moment. I'd like to introduce Alex Levin, who's our teacher at SAU-39 School here tonight, and one of our outstanding teachers. Thank you.
I'm Carrie James. I'm the Director of Human Resources for SAU-39, and we are here representing the INVEST pillar. The INVEST pillar, sorry, Mary Lou.
No, that's okay. No, I'm Mary Lee Mullins, the chair of the Sauhegan School Board, and Peg Bennett on the Amherst School Board, and John Robichaux, who is the Director of Buildings and Grounds for Sauhegan, and Howard Brown, who is another Sauhegan board member, also on our committee.
INVEST actually has two goals. The first one is to attract, develop, and retain quality educators and staff who share our commitment to excellence in teaching. And our second goal is to modernize our facilities and infrastructure to support the academic, athletic, arts, and wellness needs of the 21st century learner and align with our strategic plan. And our INVEST page can be found on page 11. One of our strategies was to implement our teacher leader effectiveness system. This is really something that's very much it's underway. We're evolving. We're progressing greatly with this. What we really have done, so we can hand this over to the superintendent, is to map out some of the dates and some of the timelines for teacher leader effectiveness. Some of those reflect the great work that's already happened and the next roll-ins that we're going to be doing. Also, as part of that initiative to really develop and implement, we wanted to make sure that succession planning was actually part of this conversation. We feel like having a good succession plan is really very effective for leaders and for all people in their positions. We wanted to make sure we acknowledge that.
And I guess one key point is that the support staff system is not in place yet, and so we targeted September 2016 for the beginning of the implementation for the support staff.
Right. It's currently happening, but we want to be able to expand upon that in a more concrete manner, more consistently. One of our other strategies was to identify and provide innovative and competitive employee benefits. And this is something that we've always been doing when we go into negotiations and we're looking at our comps and what we're looking at as far as what we offer to employees, what's competitive, what's realistic. One of the new initiatives that we had is really creating an SAU-39 Healthcare Partnership Committee. And this is for stakeholders from across many different disciplines within SAU-39 to really evaluate healthcare as it's evolving and the changes that are happening, some of the obstacles and struggles that we're faced with as far as cost and containment and education. So we have a committee that's working to really explore healthcare and how that works and how we can actually be better consumers of our healthcare and provide that information to our employees and our stakeholders who do participate in healthcare. One of the other things, too, is the SAU-39 admin frameworks, and that really has been always looking at administrative compensation. So that's really being rolled out. In addition to negotiations, we're always looking at it during a negotiation year. We want to look at it annually to make sure that we look at support staff and professional staff and administrators so that we always have accurate data, so we have a good pulse of where we are with that. One of our things we'd like to do starting over the summertime is really look at a teacher mentor induction program. And that's not just for teachers. We want to look at that for all levels of our position, having a mentor program. Like almost like the succession planning, having an idea of what's going to happen. We want to make sure we do a good job with our induction of our new hires, whether they're new to the industry or new just to SAU-39 or new to their individual building if they've changed. So we wanted to make sure that we did a good job with that and maybe just capture some of the commonalities that we are doing already, but just look at that unite thread and make sure that we're really putting it into place and have some consistency on a K-12 basis.
We also have a SAU-39 substitute teacher program, which has been in place and up and running. So our goal with that is to continue that and sustain that, so our substitutes are prepared in our classrooms, that they have the resources they need to be that teacher for our students when our teachers are absent. Do you want to talk about evaluating professional development choices?
Oh, you're doing a good job. I'm just here for moral support.
Thank you. We really do want to look at and evaluate the professional development program and the choices employees have. We want to be able to survey staff and what they're looking for. What is their personal growth looking at? What is the building professional growth looking at? What's the districts? And really just looking at why people are doing what they're doing for professional development. Are they taking courses? Are they being are they pushing themselves? Are they exploring other avenues that maybe they hadn't? Are we utilizing professional development money like we're budgeting for? And if we're not, how come? So why are they not doing it? Is it a time issue? Is it a reimbursement issue? Is it a this is where I am in my life issue? But really asking them to find out why they're using it and why they're not, and figure out what's the best for them so that we're really maximizing those dollars and those professional development activities.
I think that we assumed that when the professional development money wasn't being used, it was because the employees, chose not to or didn't want to use it or didn't find programs that they wanted to attend. But, some of the questions that came up during our discussions were, is it because the money isn't enough? One of the questions was, while they get, I know it's Sauhegan's $650 a year, I don't know if it's the same for every district, maybe that's really not enough and they're choosing not to because a program or a conference they want to go to costs $1,000 and they can't really count on being reimbursed. So we'd like, an idea of maybe a survey going out to find out really why the professional development money is not being used, like Carrie said.
One of our other strategies was really encouraging and supporting health and wellness mindset with students and staff. And of those two initiatives, the first one was improving recreational and athletic facilities. In addition to completion of the turf field at Sauhegan, we really felt it was important to create a plan to identify the needs of areas of improvement. We don't know what we don't know yet, and we feel like we need to look at all the buildings and come up with a plan, a 5-year plan to look at that as far as what needs to happen. And also to identify our roles and responsibilities and assets between the town and the schools and recreation, what's happening and how is that working. So we really think that was something that we'd really like to start to do, this upcoming school year. Maybe June would be a good time over the summer, start to have those conversations, but explore it in just a different way and see how we can really maximize our resources and our connections. Another initiative that we're looking at is increasing opportunities for students and staff for their wellness. We've implemented SAU-39 staff and wellness opportunities, which are voluntary, asking employees to invest in them, take some time for them, an hour a month, give them some resources. We want to survey the staff and ask them what they want, what do they need, what's important to them. We've been utilizing our resources through both Primex and also Health Trust, so we're utilizing resources that we have available to us, which are current and they're fresh, and we want to make sure that we're providing that to the employees. We want to make sure they want it. We want to make sure we're giving them the programming that's really important to them and not just things that we think they might need or might want. So really checking in with them a bit. We've actually added a wellness partners to our biometric screening, which is part of our medical consumerism, which is part of knowing your numbers, which is happening actually next Tuesday. But we have 20 vendors from our community who are wellness partners with us coming in to give resources to our employees and have conversations with them and just create more of that exposure, which ties in with some of the programming that we've been doing this year. We also want to look at the idea of really exploring the advisory Division I type of how students are talking and learning and developing and exploring that and showing their growth and highlighting that and demonstrating that. So we'd like to really start next school year exploring that opportunity or that type of model on maybe a smaller scale. Maybe we can do a little bit of that at each of the districts starting at a young level. So when you leave 3rd grade and you go to the 4th grade wing in Mount Vernon, that's a big move. That's a really big step. You're on the other wing now. Going to the middle school is a huge thing. Giving opportunities for our students to really celebrate their success, their growth. It helps with their being able to talk and develop with their friends and their peers, but also to speak socially as all the things that they do throughout but giving them opportunity to really highlight that. So we'd like to explore something advisory-ish like that, maybe in some of the other groups. And we're probably going to find some of it might be happening in homeroom anyway, just on the level that's appropriate for that developmental stage. So again, we don't know because we haven't asked the question. So we'd like to ask the question and find out.
And I guess I would add not just advisory, but roundtable discussions like we have in 10th grade at Sauhegan, where they reflect on what they learned, where their strengths are, where their weaknesses are, and where they can still improve. And, it's kind of a self-reflection piece also. And that idea came out of a fall forum national conference that some of us went to, and thought it was a great idea. And some of the schools there do it at very young ages even.
Yes?
I just wanted to comment that my 7th grader, I don't know if all of the teams do it or both teams, but my 7th grader just yesterday came home with a binder, and I thought, oh my God, we're doing roundtable in 7th grade. And he came home and he had samples of his work. He had to sit with both of his parents and go through. This is a piece that I'm proud of, and this is one that I need to work on, and this is why. And he had to own all of the work that he did, and he had to pick samples from. It was so like sophomore year. It was really, and then he had to write reflection on it. So it was like, oh my God, it was awesome.
Is that consistently?
I don't know.
Do you know or?
They did just,
We actually do something that accomplishes
Right.
years, and that's deepening in that way this year because of the early time we had our parent conferences. There wasn't a lot of work that could be done, so they extended it out for the 10 children bring it home.
Oh, okay.
Because when we came that first night, and they were only a few things that they had done, especially those who come back from environmental schools, there wasn't a lot of actual projects that just started.
Great. I mean, this is exciting, and as we continue to go through and work and map out and overlay all these great ideas, we're going to see that we have some commonality amongst all of our pillars. So that's pretty exciting in itself.
I'd just like to remind people to use their microphones when they're commenting so people at home can hear us.
Oh, great. Our last strategy that we're looking at is investing in infrastructure to support the 21st century learning. Explore community, state, and national partnerships in modernizing our facilities and our infrastructure. Some of this is happening in part at Sauhegan already. It's probably happening in part at some of our other buildings and districts as well. We as a committee, we really struggled with this one. This one was not as easy to map out for us and to hand over. We really were thinking that maybe it needs to be broken apart. So perhaps explore community, state, and national partnerships as one item and one thought. The other thought, explore opportunities to modernize our facilities and infrastructure to support student and employee success. We felt like there were separate veins, and we had a hard time really not breaking them apart and looking at that. So really we want to identify a plan to explore this initiative, and do we need to break it apart, or does it make sense if it's together? And that's something we would want to have a discussion about. And we felt there was a lot of great information in this, but this initiative had a lot of merit to it, and we thought breaking it apart really honored the two different veins that they had, which would complement each other. We also came up with a really large Invest Idea Bank. We had a lot of great ideas, we had a lot of enthusiasm, and we said, okay, we need to contain this. We have so many people and so much time, and there's other pillars out there. Yes, Peter did. He did rein us in a couple of times as we were working through this and said, we're running out of room and pages. So we have a great list that we'd like to turn over and share why these brainstorming ideas were flowing, and we hated to stop that creativity. So we're looking forward to our strategic plan and implementing a lot of our great ideas. So thank you.
I'm the Director of School Nutrition for SAU-39. We are the connect pillar. The goals that we were tasked with create learning opportunities that extend beyond the walls of our schools and engage our local citizenry, civic organizations, local businesses, and alumni in supporting and promoting our educational system. So we've had one meeting so far, and to achieve these goals, we came up with 3 great subcommittees. And we will have someone from each subcommittee speak about how we're going to achieve these goals through those subcommittees. So first, person that's going to speak is Lisa Lyon. she's a new marketer of the week.
Good evening. At our meeting, we chose in marketing to look at the public relations aspect of that, and starting with the wealth of wonderful things that have occurred in our schools that we find out at home from our kids and so on, but it's really something that's worthy of getting out there and spreading into not only our community and outside of our town. And so initially what we want to do is begin with networking with the school, finding out who would be the best people to provide us those wonderful opportunities, the information, getting it covered, photographed, and then also who we need to go through to get things approved and so on. So that's initially what we have looked at, and we do that K-12. And then we got sidetracked with the present things going on.
Hi, so I'm Lucianne Foes from Amherst School Board. I am on the subcommittee for college prep development and outside resources. And so what we know is that there are resources all around us that we want to tap into. And the idea is that we want to knock down the walls of classrooms and redefine what a classroom is, which would involve the community and the world becoming a part of that classroom composition. So we want to look at connecting with colleges and universities in and out of state to explore and offer college credit for classes, working collaboratively with colleges to ensure that our programming is college preparatory and providing our students with the skills necessary to be quality candidates for the most competitive colleges. And additionally, we are looking at connecting with businesses, both local and beyond, for so many different purposes: networking opportunities, internships, shadowing, which is more at a high school level, along with, though, for all grade levels, gaining applied learning opportunities and real-life application of skills being learned within classrooms, as well as introducing our students with various career opportunities, which again will be more focused at the high school level. But we do already have a few connections, and I can't speak to what's happening at the high school. I wish Rob was here with Dime, but I know that he's already started doing this work. But we do have other programs that have us connected with outside businesses like EAE Systems and First Robotics. And so we're looking at doing that for all grade levels, where appropriate and age level appropriate. So that's going to be the focus of our subcommittee work, starting to develop those pathways.
So my name is Sarah Skinner, and I'm part of the subcommittee for new programming. And one of the ideas that we came up with is a program called Senior Moments to really reach out to the seniors in our community and bring them into the classroom. So it's, I'd like to we'll take the walls down and we really bring the community in. And this is actually a program that can be for K through 12th grade. And one of the programs that we'd like to do for the high school is Senior Moments, where the high school students will be assigned to a senior, and they'll take down their legacy, their story. I'm hoping for some World War II vets because they're so interesting and it really makes for a great night. But what these kids will do is they'll actually have to take down the life story. They're going to have to write a script, and then they're going to act out that scene as that person. And then we're hoping to have a big night where the families are all invited, the seniors are invited and the students are invited. And in that way, it brings the seniors into the high school, and they really get to see the work and these kids when they're, at their best. We're also thinking of doing international music class with the seniors, and so it brings in different cultures of the grandparents and the seniors. Reading books, singing, dancing, putting on puppet shows. Some of these little ones take the dance classes, and so that they can do their little tap dances. And it's just a really neat way to let the grandparents know that there's other things besides just reading the book, getting everybody up and active. And a couple other things like a spring fling, possibly have a dance, with the old time music, and sort of sharing what the seniors have experienced in their lives with their really young kids. And there's some other things that we're kind of tossing around, really trying to focus on the young kids, preschool and kindergarten, because I feel like that there's a lot of programs to bring the community in that we could, utilize for those seniors. And I think that's it. So thank you. Any questions? Thank you.
No, is it coming up?
Get that set up. It's if you
Right
do
here.
the Windows P.
I want to
Here, click
explore.
on that. You want what's on
Yeah,
the
it's
top
on
right,
the
right?
phone,
Yeah. Okay, well, yeah, so it's ready. Go there. You should be able to pull it up.
Okay. Took some time, sorry. My name's Frank Brown, and I'm going to present the Streamline Pillar section. I'm going to go through introduce my team. So everybody that's here, and Lisa is also recently joined our team, and which is great because she's got some experience actually with a consolidation effort in another town recently. I'm just going to go through what we were supposed to go through. I think we've got a little bit of a different charter than some other people because there's some specific dates actually coming up in the next month, and then there's some others, and we're working towards a vote sometime in a year from March. So there's some things that we've got to get through actually pretty quickly. So review what our charter was, the sum, the status, what we came up with. We came up with a little bit of a calendar. So how are we going to pace through this? So you'll see that in all. So the first thing was just reviewing the goals on the left-hand side. It was become a more efficient and effective one. So the efficient one becomes pretty clear, and we're trying to save some money and look at consolidation and stuff like that. The effectiveness one is a little bit different, and that involves a lot of questions about, well, what about Unite, and what are they going to do around that? So immediately there was some discussion about, well, we got to go talk to those other groups and understand if effectiveness means how are we going to measure, not from a financial viewpoint, but how well are we doing, let's say like this leadership, teacher leadership thing. How well are we going to measure that? How do we measure it? And then how do we measure it month to month so we can track as we go through? And so in order to do that, you need to talk to whoever is coming up with that metric. So there's a note, as you can see in a subsequent slide, there's a few questions about, okay, we can go so far, but we need to talk to people who are actually going to create something so we can help work with them to figure out how to measure it. So two things, optimum configurations for school districts. That means looking at different options As it turns out, in order to do that, it requires a warrant article. And because of anytime you're going to look at either changes to, let's say, the Sauhegan cooperative articles, it specifies in the articles that you have to get voter approval to do that. If you were to look at another option, let's say of consolidation between Mount Vernon and Amherst is another option, then you also have to ask the voters in those towns too, again, to allow you to go do that. So that was prepared by the council. It is going to be appearing on the warrant articles. This coming in this vote, you'll hear about it at the deliberative sessions, so that's already in the works. The second part of the strategy, look at some things. I'll show you, we did a lot of work, actually jumped ahead because we had some folks looking at, okay, how do we inventory all the systems? How do we inventory, look at the processes that are in the district? And then Peg just told me the other day that she had spent a lot of time, there you are, documenting a lot of processes at Amherst that would sort of roll right into that. So those things, there's a lot of work done, and we actually started to sort of develop the more specific checklists of what could you do in February and March to get going if you needed a deliverable by June. So we looked at two committees, as you maybe already got. We had an efficiency committee and then an effectiveness committee. We actually had three and then consolidated. We looked at 4 scenarios, or we're considering looking at 4 scenarios. Leave them as they are. A full consolidation into one district, which would mean no SAU. To have a Sauhegan cooperative and then ASD and Mount Vernon consider a cooperative again there. Now that would require voter approval if there wasn't a full consolidation. And then an option where there was Sauhegan, ASD, and Mount Vernon maintained itself as a district, but what it did was it was only voting on a budget that would tuition everybody into the Amherst sort of K through 8 kind of system. There may be others, and maybe we'll hear about them tonight, that people want to sort of say, you really need to look at this. We developed a set of strategies to start working in this February with the assumption that there would be a vote in March of 2017. So once you have that date, you start backing up from that and say you need to have stuff ready so that you can talk actively to voters, maybe socialize it over this coming summer, much more actively through the boards and whatever's in the fall, leading up to January and February information deliberative sessions. That's the most aggressive thing. If you miss that date, you're waiting another year. And as I said earlier, while we would develop some strategies, there were clearly some things that we needed to talk to other pillars. Just some single areas. We started looking at who are the different communities we'd have to talk to. We have more specific lists around the schools and the SAU and the different board members, and that was clear. The charter also calls for engagement of the citizens and parents and stuff like that. That's less clear because you wouldn't do that until you already had somewhat of a couple of proposals reasonably well developed before you wanted to go talk to people about it. Researched some other case studies of some other communities that have done this. It's more on what did they learn, where were the cost savings, what should, any advice to us as we go about this. We have the models and maybe more, as I said. We need to compile a list of the indicators, and that's where the advance and unite pillars, we said we need to understand them better in order to have what are for the effectiveness metrics now, which are not necessarily dollar things, but maybe, okay. What should we be measuring? How do you do that? We decided you could start running financial models actually pretty easily right off the bat with some assumptions, and only that for the purpose of understanding where are the really sensitive variables as you look at this. If you run it, and you can probably guess maybe what of them are, but you run it, and then as you run a few different options and change them, you can see which one changed things 30% or which one's changed 1 or 2%. We already have an inventory of a lot of the systems and started on the processes. Once you develop the recommendations, you need to validate them multiple times to go back to people. And then we need to understand the whole voter decision-making process, district by district, actually, because you can't assume it's going to be the same in each one of the districts. Okay, so this is sort of a general plan. We formed the two subcommittees on the left-hand side. Basically, there's a data gathering phase in February and March. We go do it. I broke out sort of the two, efficiency and effectiveness, with some items. What would you do in each one of those? Starting in March, there's the warrant article passes. You get voter approval to do it. And then, having gathered the data, you start in the April-May timeframe to develop the recommendations and test those, again, with the different districts and the different voters and whoever is appropriate, because it is a vote. It is a political issue that has to be sold to the different towns. We'd present that in, we assumed, a June timeframe. If that was the case, if you go, these are fiscal years, you'd start revising, starting to communicate over the summer, flush it out. Starting in September, you'd likely start a much more comprehensive communication plan to the different districts about, here it is, here's what we're talking about, here are the impacts of it, what does it mean to the schools themselves, what does it mean financially, et cetera. Then warrant articles, if required, in February and March. So that's the, we don't know whether that's the calendar, but we thought that's the most aggressive calendar you can have in terms of getting approval for a change in the current district configurations. As I said, we have some more detail that's not in here that we went ahead and did anyway, because we also got caught in, are we supposed to just develop a calendar, or are we supposed to actually do the work? And we did some of it and then backed off because it started to get too much. We need to probably pick up some additional members for the implementation team, Lisa being one of them, and help out. And I think we will likely start to, the data gathering inventory stuff as quickly as we can, assuming we can do that. And as you might guess, when you ever do modeling and you look at this, you need to really document what your assumptions are and make sure everybody understands them, because that's what's really going to drive the changes. And questions or comments? No.
It's just to allow the district to create a plan.
Yeah, that's correct. Simply to go off and look at options you need approval. Peg? Well, if there's only one district, let's say like Bedford, there's an SAU, but not as we have an SAU. Maybe I'm wrong too. Maybe you don't even.
So no separate budget for the SAU when there's only
Yeah.
one SAU, and it's one entity.
One entity.
So the entity would be that school district. Yeah.
Yes.
We had considered consolidating common resources in the SAU as another configuration.
We didn't talk about that. There's no reason we shouldn't. So, I mean, I guess that would. I shouldn't say anything off the top of my head. Yeah, absolutely.
So I'm going to say that I was on the Streamline Committee prior, when we actually developed the original plan, and we looked at many, many ways, and there were so many barriers to actually sharing resources due to legal considerations, collective bargaining agreements, just a multitude of things. So when we actually looked at it in our original Streamline Committee, we really found that to actually do that, there was very little, and we're actually doing what we can to consolidate resources, and that any further consolidation would require an actual legal consolidation.
That's true. And for a whole lot of things, right? There's some type of consolidation, just a different configuration. Right, all the technologies that if you have half the kind of people in places that each take benefits,
But they, so if you wanted to combine your custodial services, for an example, then all the boards would have to then have a similar salary schedule, similar HR policies on vacation, sick. There would be many things that they would have to consolidate and around that. That would be the easy one. The harder one is where there are actual collective bargaining agreements for consolidating those employees. The collective bargaining agreements actually stand in the way of being able to do that. We could not take one teacher from a district, a particular district, and ask them to teach in another district. That's they would have to be employed by the different district. So there would be issues with that. It's a very, there are a lot of barriers to doing what sometimes seems sensible.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, and Betty is an expert, that we ought to look at that, and maybe we dismiss it right away, but we ought to maybe document a little bit more what the reasons are why that maybe isn't as good an idea as it appears initially, kind of thing. Yeah.
It of course, kind of follows up on what Tom was saying. One is I was hoping we'd also look at the processes that exist. For example, we're getting DocStar in the SAU. There's a lot of inefficiencies within the individual districts that could be improved upon. It doesn't look like that's being looked at. I'm a bit concerned that we seem to be not discussing. Well, there wasn't a whole lot mentioned of it, so it seems to be not being discussed how to improve within the existing system.
So I think the first thing is we intend to look at all of the processes within the districts, and then the processes between the districts and the SAU. Now, so I guess maybe I wasn't as complete on that as I maybe was.
The whole discussion focused on consolidation, as far as I was able to tell.
Okay. Point taken. That's what was given. Consolidate.
My point being is that it appears that the focus is purely on consolidation. I'm hoping that we'll be looking more at current existing. That's why I interpreted what I heard. So I'm hoping that there'll be more focus on existing processes within each district and improving those in addition to looking at consolidation.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would say it differently. I mean, the main goal is consolidate, okay. In the process of understanding...
Excuse me. Yes. The main goal is not consolidate.
Well, I'm just reading goal. That's all I'm saying.
Consolidate processes.
Right. And is the consolidating processes, okay.
There's a difference between consolidating processes and consolidating districts.
Yeah.
So I want to ensure that consolidation does not purely talk about consolidating districts.
So Bruce, I think, like on the third area down the larger...
Yep, Betty, I did see that. Yep. I interpreted the entire discussion focusing on consolidating districts. Okay. And that's the way I'm interpreting it.
Two separate committees.
All right. I understand. I'm just giving you my point.
And I think he's right if that's what he heard. That wasn't the intent, and I probably did emphasize consolidation.
You've answered my question. I'm just, you keep pointing it out to him. I'm saying what I've heard is talk on consolidating districts, not looking at the individual processes and systems within each district.
I'd just like to offer a thought. We feel the efforts that we're talking about making here are in service to other groups. So you employ all the different processes that are used among all the different districts and the systems that underpin those processes. And you begin to have a dialogue about who feels their processes to do something and the systems they're using are really effective and working very well and helping people be productive. And then you begin a dialogue about, well, should some of those processes be adopted by other organizations, regardless of whether there's any consolidation or not. It's a separate path. So you might have understood that it's clearly a very big effort to do. And then even looking at consolidation models, we believe we are really in service to the goals that some of the other pillars are talking about. So creating a unified student experience. What would be the best organizational structure that make happen the things that pillar group comes up with? And secondly, whether it's Unite or other groups, we need to take some direction from you so that that's what sort of informs our thinking and recommendations about processes and systems as well as potential models. And one thing that I'm sensitive is we are on very different time frames at the moment. We're trying to be done by June of this year, and some of the criteria is a year from now. Another group on whom we feel interdependent will have their work done. And probably at some point we'll decide on rebalancing time.
Any other questions, Bob? I did. Thanks.
Hello. I'm Dave Chen, the chief cat herder of the advanced group. And when I'm not the chief cat herder of the advanced group, I'm the chief cat being herded by Mary Lou Mullins on the Sauhegan School Board.
Hard job.
I know. You're cursed. Anyway, advanced. Just a repetitious thing here, just what the goal is. The goal is of advanced to prepare our students to compete and thrive in a continuously changing, technologically connected global marketplace. There are 6 initiatives. We have not addressed all 6 initiatives yet. We've taken them from top to bottom. The first one is to implement an all-day kindergarten, and I'll let actually Bethany pick that one up, or
yeah.
one of them. I don't know.
Yeah. I'll speak to that. We took that initiative and actually divided it up for both Mount Vernon and Amherst, since we're in different places. Mount Vernon this year is implementing full-day kindergarten with a new curriculum. We're collecting data to inform our evaluation of full-day K, and we're planning summer work and looking at changing the curriculum for those students entering into first grade. We're a year behind in Amherst. We worked really hard this fall to look at some budget implications and look at collecting data this year in Amherst on our half-day kindergarten students. We made the decision to place full-day kindergarten in the proposed operating budget, and we've been holding many community forums and informing the public of full-day kindergarten and our need for full-day K. So that work is underway, and then it will follow along with similar to, we anticipate it following along similar to what we're doing in Mount Vernon. So that we really mapped it out, and we did go out, a few years out on our spreadsheet and looked at what that would look like.
And we recognize that this is smaller. It's not for you to try and read all the pieces.
Yeah.
We wanted to be representative of some of the different roadmaps and some of the different steps that we decided are really kind of critical to this being successful for all the learners in our communities.
The next initiative was to implement a system-wide competency-based assessment model, and this work ties in directly to our PACE work, or performance assessment of competency education work, and that is part of our pilot plan with the New Hampshire Department of Education. And our work is in very different places in each of our schools and districts. Sauhegan this year is continuing as their second year as a Tier 1 implementing district, meaning that they're actually implementing the performance assessments and working to finalize what those performance assessments will look like this year, but also field testing ones that will be in operation the following year. So that work is outlined. One other piece, which ties in with the your Unite, right? The Unite committee is a competency-based grading and reporting system, which goes hand in hand with this. So we have been communicating with that group as well, but we put a little note in here about that work being underway and really tying in deeply to this performance assessment work. So Sauhegan has been working for years on this piece, but really second year as a Tier 1 district. And then, Bethany, if you want to take the middle school.
Is a Tier 2 school. So that means that we're going through the process of really understanding what performance assessments look like and the instructional shifts that are a part of that. And that will move us towards that competency-based assessment model. So there's a lot of professional development that's already happening with teachers over the course of this year. And we're looking out to what are the continued needs that we have instructionally to make sure that we're taking that shift from a teacher-centered classroom to truly a student-centered classroom, and what the next generation of assessments look like. Moving away from bubble tests and one right answer to really increasing students' depth of knowledge where there's multiple right answers. And how do we create assessments that engage kids that are as exciting as the learning that's actually happening? And so that's the work that's happening now and will continue into the next year. If we plot out a little bit further, we hope to be where Sauhegan is in the next couple of years and actually implementing these as part of our statewide assessment model.
And Clark Wilkins and Mount Vernon Village School, they are Tier 3 PACE schools this year, but that means that we're really starting professional development around competencies. What is a competency, and what does that really mean? How does that tie in with performance assessments? So really kind of a basic understanding, and then moving in more deeply next year, Clark Wilkins and Mount Vernon Village School will begin actually designing performance assessments, as Amherst Middle School has started doing this year. And then that will just follow.
One other piece that's really important that we recognize for all three districts is really looking at the community outreach and the communication that goes around this, because this is a big instructional shift, and it's just a shift in how we assess students. It's very different than when we all went to school. And so what does that look like, and really being transparent in those communications so that we can partner with parents when your students come home with report cards, when your students come home with assessments. What does that really tell you about how they're performing and how we can work in collaboration, parents and schools, to help all of these students be successful? The last piece that we tackled as a group was really looking at what STEM looks like in our districts. And we recognize that there are a couple of different pieces to this, and each of the schools are in different places, and we need to acknowledge that as part of our Unite in moving everything forward. We recognize that there is a content piece to STEM, and there is an instructional practice piece to STEM, and that you need to approach those two different pieces through different methodologies. So in terms of the content piece, mathematics is really in a good place, having gone through revisions with the Common Core standards and looking at mathematical practices, not just content. Science is currently starting to look at those pieces. I know that Sauhegan has already been looking at what competencies at each of the science courses look like. We've been able to do some cross-grade level work, which is really exciting to really set the stage for this, looking at what are the progressions of our students from kindergarten going forward, so that with our end product when they graduate from Sauhegan, what do we want our scientists to look like? What we're doing right now is really looking at the standards, doing crosswalks to see how do we align with the next generation science standards? Where are there gaps in our practice? Where are there gaps in the different standards, and how do we address those moving forward? That's really the first phase of the work, is identifying where that is. The next phase is really about how do we now align our curricular units to address the next generation science standards. One of the wonderful things about those is that they incorporate not just the science, but also the engineering and the technology pieces as well. So there are actually engineering standards within there, and then they correlate again with the mathematical standards, so that we have some really tight alignment in that document to guide our work moving forward. Once we start developing those units, other things we've put on here are doing some Summer Institute-style work with teachers to really dive deep into this, so that we can carry this work out with fidelity in our classroom. The instructional practice piece of it, the other piece we need to do is we've put on here to do an assessment, an inventory of what are the science and engineering practices, what are the mathematical practices that are occurring in non-STEM content areas. So how do you do STEM in a meaningful way in an English class, in a reading class, in a music class? And so looking at those science and engineering practices as well as the mathematical practices, doing an inventory and seeing where they already exist in our structure, And then how do we amplify those? Because those are the practices that, I kind of chuckle when we call them science and engineering or mathematical practices because they're really life practices. It's about problem solving, about analyzing data, about communicating out, developing hypotheses, carrying out experiments. And those are things that translate into any content area that we're talking about that are really valuable skills for all of our students. The last piece in this that's important to look at is that K-8 is in a very different kind of place in a different environment than the high school. And because by the time you get to the high school, we have those content-specific courses like an engineering course or a particular kind of science course. And so really looking at program of studies and constantly doing some assessment work on that to really make sure that is that program of studies reflective of the 21st century coursework that we want students to be able to participate and engage with before they graduate, before they go off into post-secondary education. So how do we evaluate the program of studies and make changes or amplify certain course offerings to make sure that we're really meeting the needs and the interests of all of our students, exposing them all to this. So we have a lot of exciting work ahead of us in these initiatives.
So, one of the things we started out with, obviously, was that we want a K through 12 program, a complete K through 12, because if you don't have K through 12, you'll get into the 12th grade with nobody coming up to take the courses that you develop. So one of the things we looked at was the Maker program that's at the middle school and other programs like that that are ready-made for, moving kids through the system. And so we thought that was very good. The other thing is that we needed to understand what was the issues that, girls and young women have in taking on, some of these STEM-based courses and see what we could do there. So we sort of started with the end in mind. So what is it in a high school program that you need to have in this modern world in order to get through moving students forward into college and that kind of thing? So we did a couple of things. One thing we did was we looked at the program of studies of some of the leading high schools in the area, and Christine loaded all those down, and there's on our OneNote? It's OneNote, right? Yeah, on OneNote, she has a list of the programs that some leading schools like Concord Carlisle and I think Lexington High School in Massachusetts. In addition, Hanover High School, Dresden Hanover High School in New Hampshire, Bedford, I think Hollis Brookline too?
And Wyndham.
And Wyndham. Okay, so we took some of the leading high schools that we thought had good STEM programs and looked at their program of studies, which is the list of courses they offer, and we compared them to what was available at Sauhegan today. We're missing a few things, so we wanted to make sure we move forward with understanding what the gaps are. The second thing we did was we brought a focus group in. I've got to thank Amy for that, actually. I called Amy and I said, you could help me with your son, Jack. And got Jack to basically bring a bunch of his colleagues who graduated from high school 2 years ago. They're sophomores now. And we said right after New Year's Day, the first day after New Year's Day, we brought in 6 students who became our guinea pigs or our talking points and understanding. They were all 6 were in college. They were all sophomores in college. This was mid-year in their sophomore year, and we wanted to understand from them what values they took out of Sauhegan, what things they thought were missing, what are the good things, what are the bad things, and so we wanted to get a whole picture on how this looked, and this was basically focused on STEM. So I want to make that very clear. We had kids students from a variety of schools, ranging from Brown to BU, I think, University UNH, Rhode Island, Northeastern, and we asked them, all these questions about. It was a very interactive dialogue that we had, which was actually quite exciting to me. It was kind of fun. But we basically gathered a lot of information from them, and there were some common threads. They thought they were all well prepared for college. They thought they were given good educations here at Sauhegan. They talked about, I won't give all the specific teachers' names, but they were very complimentary of a set of teachers and how well they were prepared for their college work. And we also asked them questions like, what were you missing? what did other students that you competed against have that you didn't have? What did you have to compete with that other kids didn't have? And so we got some pretty good answers. And one of the things that was sort of universal was that these engineering students, well, some of it, there was electrical engineering, mechanical engineering, computer science, applied math. I'm missing something. Civil engineering, and pharmaceutical, biological sciences. Anyway, one thing we got back was that we all needed coding. We needed to know how to program a computer, how to perform, the acts of developing some software. And that was kind of universal with all 6. Now, again, these were technologically based students. And, as we looked at the coursework we have, it really didn't seem to match what we had available. So that's one thing we took away from that. And the other things was basically the curriculum that we had was a good curriculum, but we needed to fill in a couple of voids. Okay. So the next thing we're going to do is develop a list of a program of studies for ourselves, figuring out where we would have holes and where we wanted to fill in some holes. And that is ongoing. And the final thing is we looked at the idea of, all of these things require some level of study and understanding about what other schools are doing. And one of the things we were looking at is what institutions and foundations in the area can give us some resources, funding, to have some of this work being studied in the future. It can't all be done by lay people. It can't all be done by putting things more on the staff. It has to be done with some sort of idea of where we go with getting extra resources. And there are foundations out there that will support this work. I think we're going to do some work in finding those. So we had, and I don't want to show you. Going to. There we go. Where is it?
Which did you want to look at?
The STEM tree. Oh, okay, there. We have, you can't read it all, but we have going out through the end of 2018, a set of milestones that we have identified. I'm not going to go through all those because it would be a little bit too much. So, any questions?
The other thing, we did have 3 additional initiatives, as you can tell from what we shared. We met often and really great meetings, but we didn't get as deep through all, as far down on our chart as we hoped or anticipated. So there were initiatives that unfortunately we didn't have the chance to discuss and to roadmap out. So that's something we still need to do. That was the multilingual instruction, opportunities for students in music and the arts, and then expand and support opportunities for students to combine coursework with participation in experiences outside of their school or grade. So really important initiatives, so our committee does need a little bit of additional time to finish road mapping those.
So I'm glad to hear that you want to take additional time because I wasn't sure. I was aware that you met with a lot of engineering and math students, to see what they felt was missing from our curriculum. And so it doesn't surprise me they would say coding. I think we all agree that STEM is important and that K through 12. But that was going to be one of my questions was, did you meet with a group of art students? Did you meet with a group of foreign language majors? Did you,
Right, and unfortunately we didn't. And that certainly was a gap in our work. I think that we get some really interesting information from those alumni as well about their experiences and what we need to do to enhance our arts program and other areas.
So when we didn't get down to the last 3, Mary Lou, that was the problem.
I think we got too deep in some and probably needed to come back out in order to get to these. But we kind of got so deep in, we didn't.
Yeah, I think some of these initiatives are overwhelming. You can really get
into
the weeds.
You can,
Lucia?
I'm actually glad you didn't get to all of them because I'm hoping that your committee and our committee will be able to work together collaboratively the strategy regarding establishing collaborative efforts with high school policy.
That sounded redundant.
And I think it would be really productive for us to make joint efforts. So I'm glad this comes out.
Yes.
I'm interested in what you were speaking about for the girls in STEM. I think we should make it STEAM because the arts, like she had mentioned, you really have to focus on that. The emotional component, when you talk about girls, if you
put that into the arts and in with STEM, I think that that's a place that maybe we can focus on combining them. And I was, I love the presentation. I thought, wow, they really went out there and got the community that we need to hear from in. But what were your thoughts about girls in STEM?
Bethany is actually doing her dissertation on this.
So this is
It's missing.
This is actually the focus of my doctoral research, is looking at girls in STEM and how we encourage that. I think one of the interesting pieces, if I can address first the STEM, STEAM, STREAM, all of those acronyms. To me, those two pieces of STEM, being the content and the instructional choice, really bring the whole thing into picture, because every letter should be incorporated into it. And so I'm a fan of calling it STEM to look at the content piece of it, because that's the science content, the math content. But really, as an instructional choice, the arts, social studies, English, all of those pieces are access points where the way you can enhance and deliver and engage all students in those areas is by incorporating those science and engineering practices into it. So we can add all of those in, and I think that it's a way to really engage all learners in all content areas. On the girls in STEM, so there's a lot of mixed research out there. We've looked at, everybody's been looking at this problem for a very long time, and no one has.
There aren't enough
We lose girls.
Yeah.
We lose girls. There's a high interest. A lot of the research, the preponderance of research, says that middle school, if you haven't had them engaged by the time they're in middle school, you're not going to get them. You're going to continue to lose them. So we're looking at supports and structures. We're looking at things like our innovation lab, where every single student, not just the ones who identify as being interested in engineering or interested in electronics or interested in those things, but every single student, grades 5 through 8, is going to have the opportunity to participate and learn these things, because so often you may not identify with that particular topic, but if you're exposed to it, then you get hooked into it. So we have some really, really positive things happening. We're going to be looking at things like a Smart Chicks Club, which one of my colleagues in Wyndham had actually put in, where we're bringing in some of these young girls and showing them some role models and different career paths and different opportunities. But we have to start young. We have to start in kindergarten, and kindergartners can do STEM, kindergartners can do engineering. And then how do we hook them in and continuously show students, and really all students, that you can access this, that this is a career path, that there's those opportunities for you. It's about increasing that exposure and increasing that level of enjoyment, providing role models. All of those pieces are really critical. And then the school community partnerships are going to be essential in this. How do we bring in engineers from the community? How do we bring in scientists from the community and really show the diversity of different opportunities that a child can pursue? Because we don't want our students to work a day in their life. We want them to have careers, not jobs. We want them to find a way to incorporate all of the things that they're passionate about, that they're interested in, and find a way so that every day when they get up in the morning, it's not a job they're going to, but it's something they love doing. And getting kids exposure to that, especially some of our young women, and encouraging that, is the first step to making that happen.
One thing that fascinated me was when Porter took me over to the innovation and maker labs at the school, and I said, "Wow, there were girls as engaged as boys in building, electronic devices and lights that on your head that lighted up and all different kinds of things. There were lots of little projects that were going on at the time, and girls were collaborating with boys on the same project. So." That to me sounded like a good place to start. This was, I don't know, those 5th and 6th graders?
Yes.
I don't remember what they were, but...
I think the 5th graders that you saw there.
Yeah. So it could go down lower.
It's play.
Well, they were pretty serious about this.
No, there's a concept in it, and that's why we want more time in the kindergarten for play.
It's inquiry-based learning.
Dropping out, because that emotional piece that they need in particular, that they learn through play. Okay?
It's not a simple problem to solve, but I think that we have all the pieces in place to really start to tackle it in a systematic way to really make some great gains for all our students.
Just today, I was observing a class where they were our innovation lab and design instructor Steve Opry had spoken with the high school engineer group, and said, what can we do right now to get things going, to get our kids ready? And one of the things they said is, can you introduce trebuchets at the small levels so that we can have our kids go right in and not have to spend all that time? So I observed them being built today. And it'll be interesting to see. I know Bethany went through there as well this week. The girls made themselves little teams, 3, and the guys had their teams. So you could see there was a little bit of that battle going on. But I could tell right now, because I've seen those trebuchets and the way they work, the girls' teams had figured out that the longer throw and the longer distance and all that, the boys were making these smaller ones. And so, again, that's how you get that interest. Something that we never did in the past. Now they're going to see this. So this is 6th grade students that are going to realize that they have an interest in it and that they can do it. We have to convince them they can do it, really.
I also think it's worth mentioning and really important that as we really look to bring up the equity in our STEM programs, that we not lose sight of every student as well, and so that we don't shift our focus so much that we forget about every single student and their access to it. So I think that's something that we're being really mindful of, is as we're increasing these opportunities for these young women to get exposure to this, that we're also looking at how do we help all students. Because there's a whole bunch of students out there who don't identify themselves as engineers, but we know that coding, I mean, we're carrying around, all of our smartphones and all the apps that we can create and things like that now. Every student needs this as part of their skill set, as part of their toolbox, to really have those 21st century skills to be college and career ready. And so how do we really target that across the board? There's some great pictures, too, if you're interested in learning more, both on our Twitter handle and also on our AMS Facebook, where we're trying to share out some of these small little moments that are really some great learning opportunities in our school.
The music is one of the huge connections on it. It was scientific mind that we totally disregard and it's really encouraging us because this is patterns, this is systems, and very early age is so important.
And there's a lot of research. There's a lot of research showing what the implication of having students be musicians, whether it be instrumental or vocal, any of those pieces, how it changes the actual chemistry and wiring of the brain to really help students think outside of the box to tackle these problems that we don't even know that exist yet. So it's all about giving our students the tools. It's about filling up their toolboxes so that whatever path they travel through, whether they decide to go into the arts or to the sciences or to engineering or to mathematics or any of those, that they have those tools ready. And that's why we really need to look at this and tackle it as a K-12 issue, because the students who graduate from Sauhegan didn't just magically get there. They're a product of a K-12 system that we should be really proud of.
Did you talk about educating the parents also? Because, there's a mindset of a generation where parents told their girls that, you're supposed to go into this field, only this field. And we need to tell our children, we have, my wife and I, that they can do anything they want to do. They're not held to one field. They can do any field.
Does that mindset still exist? I mean,
unfortunately.
I look at it. I don't know a single parent who tells their female or their daughters that they can only do one or two things, and their boys that they can only do one or two other things. And I'm not sure how we're shunning our female students away from engineering at this point, but maybe we're just not encouraging them enough to stay in it. But I don't think we've turned a single student away because of their gender, because of away from engineering.
I wouldn't say it's turned away. A lot of the messaging is very unconscious. A lot of the messaging. So I don't believe that there are parents out there who are consciously saying, no, you can't do this. But a lot of the messaging, everything from, it's a much larger discussion, but there's a lot of subconscious messaging that we may not even realize that we're giving that can turn students, not just females, but boys and girls, onto or off to certain areas. And I
might just be toys
it's little things that we may not even be aware of.
The classes that we sign them up for, dance class.
So,
we don't push them toward math club.
Or even messages in the media that it's more important to be beautiful and look a certain way than it is to be smart. We have to make sure that it's cool to be smart if you're a girl.
And that's why we talk a lot about we are a learning community. It's not just what happens inside one classroom. It's not just what happens inside one school or the district. It's really about those connections within school and beyond school to really start changing the dialogue, to change the narrative, to one where we're empowering all students to pursue this. But while we didn't discuss that explicitly, part of what we're really working to do in the schools is really communicate out more of this, communicate out what all of our students are having access to. And again, we're not turning kids away, but it's about increasing access in lots of different places, exposure in lots of different places, so that they know of the different pathways that are possible for them.
So you're not talking about bias towards making sure more females are interested in engineering as much as you're removing biases for both men and boys. Because I hear a lot about, removing biases and keeping girls interested in engineering. But really that's not what you're saying. If I'm hearing you correctly, what you're saying is remove the gender biases to begin with. All of them on both sides, because there's biases on both sides.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And creating environments that are safe for all students. And to reach their,
we don't want to
that are safe and engaging.
I'm glad to see music and arts there because on the one hand, there's a predisposition to say, let's get more boys and girls interested in the STEM topics. But there is a proliferation of careers that are STEM informed. Okay? So, for example, I helped create a master's program at BU in science communication. So people who are interested in journalism or writing or whatnot, they didn't necessarily become scientists. They learned enough about all sciences and math to work with specialists in different fields to help cross-pollinate, bioengineering, inform the public. So I think tying in with career opportunities, Trevor Keller is working on those, to help parents and kids understand there is a very broad and ever-expanding array of professions in those areas, which if they are science or STEM, right, is a perfectly valid way to go. Right?
Absolutely.
Many more opportunities than having to become a civil engineer or
Absolutely. It's finding all those things that you love to do and building them into a career. And so many of our students, I know that, and I would hazard to guess it was this way for many of us when we enrolled in a major at university. We had no idea what all of the options were with this. All of the current research is showing that, by 2018, STEM careers are supposed to grow by 17%, as opposed to about 11% of all other careers. And if you look at the literature, when they talk about STEM careers, they talk about music and instrument design and audio and visual and all these other places that we may not associate as being STEM careers, but I love how you said they're tangential to it, right? They're science journalism and communication. Yeah, exactly. So there's a lot of communication that needs to happen out there on all levels.
Bethany, we can talk about lack of orientation, so to speak, male and female, but my understanding is STEM careers have gone from being 38% female to down to 17 at the moment.
It depends on which.
That's an amazing statistic that we need to contemplate because clearly
that's
not the way it starts in third grade.
The interesting thing is it's really different based on what kind of vein of the STEM you're looking at. In biological sciences and STEM fields that have that life science component, we're pretty much equal. We've pretty much reached gender parity in those places. In engineering, the gap is huge in those engineering-related fields. In physics-related fields, the gap is huge. In chemistry, it's not as large as it is in the physics and engineering vein of things, but it's still significant. And so it's very different in those different things. So it's hard to have it as a universal conversation, you're right. But I really do believe, and everything that I'm reading and everything that I'm seeing in schools, I think that the younger we can tackle it across the board, the more exposure we get in all of those, we're going to start to see those numbers. We're going to start to see those numbers really rise.
So I want to say that I really agree with the feedback you got from that focus group you had of STEM-focused students, especially on the expansion into computer engineering and software development. For many reasons, some I heard, some I did not. But my intuition says that in a couple of places, like advanced, is very important to expand the breadth of the curriculum we're offering, but also improve the quality of that curriculum. And my question is, with this expansion into various STEM and STEAM fields, how do you also at the same time maintain the personalization of learning that's so emphasized by the Unite group? which is something that's critically important with the success of the programs we already have that I'm sure those students told you about.
So most of us are carrying around in our pockets right now more technology than went up on the Apollo shuttle missions. Most of us are carrying that. The conversation has shifted. Our students no longer go to school to acquire information. You used to go to school because that's where the teachers were, and the teachers were the ones who knew. That's totally changed. That's totally been flipped on its head. I can't remember the latest statistics, but the rate at which the volume of human knowledge is doubling is astronomical. And so we can't hope to simply fill up your brains with more and more information. That's not what it's about. And so there's a shift going on from, do we want students to be data processors, or do we want them to have a curated collection of information? And it's about creating connections between different pieces of knowledge and helping students realize how to do that. And so that's where a lot of the personalization, I think, comes in, because no longer is it you must, well, there's a certain kind of culturally literate volume, culturally literate content that we all need to exist. And then beyond that, it's about looking about how we connect. What are problems that are interesting to you in the field of chemistry or in the field of biology? And then what pieces of knowledge are important to start to solve those problems? Because we're going to be asking students to solve problems that we don't know exist yet. We're going to be asking them to take on careers that haven't even yet been imagined. And so it has to be personalized, because you cannot contain all that information. You can look it up on your phone, but it's about what do you do with that information to solve a problem. What other pieces of information are important to connect to that to solve a problem. And it's in solving those problems that personalization really has the opportunity to thrive. And so part of the work that we need to do as educators is really looking at how do we make student-centered classrooms with this content as a foundation, but really helping to build the skills and practices and habits of mind that are going to allow you and your peers to then take that information, personalize it, and you may be pursuing a different problem than the person sitting next to you. And how do we make that work in the classroom so that you're pursuing something that's meaningful to you and still acquiring those skills and that knowledge that you need to be successful when you leave our walls. But that personalization has to happen, and I think it's more imperative now than ever before.
Thank you.
Great question.
Well, thank you, everyone. I know that the quantity is not much time, so I make my closing remarks brief. One little fun fact I want to share with you. So last spring, Carl Benavides, who was a teacher band and floor teacher at high school, came to me and said, we're not going to improve our band until we have strings and other instruments. So this year, with the help of the principals in our school, we started a strings program. I met with Jeff about today, actually. She is the instructor, and we now have 31 students that are from grades 3, 4, all the way on up that are learning to use the violin. And they will have rifles for them this summer and pro. So things can happen that way, and
And that's important to say as we go forward with all of the things that were talked about tonight. You really have done, and I go back 2 years when we started this work, and I've heard some people say to other people to tell me that really the superintendent should have done the strategic plan. And that's not what the board wanted in the first few moments that we met 2 years ago. I can give you names of districts where superintendents have gotten a group of 12 people, created a plan, and that's what it was. The board didn't want to do that, and here we are today. So I commend them, and I thank you for the work, which is really the foundational work in the future. Really, our kids, some of our kids in our buildings today are going to change the world, no question about it. And that's what we need to look at and continue to have offerings for them that will help them to change the world. So I thank you for your work. Last piece that I want to share with you, some things moving out, okay? So what I'd like to do is to meet with the chairs of each pillar committee. And the chairs, you can bring a couple of people with you, because I want to make sure that I have captured, and I can review this film, which is great, captured all of what went on tonight and what was talked about. And the next step would be to, on a very large frame,
There's a lot of strategic planning software out there that we can use to put all of the initiatives and goals and things that you did in your work on a larger map for the board to look at at the end of March at the SAU board meeting. So I really want to make sure I do that. If you could make an appointment with Mary Ann, the air traffic controller of SAU-39. And probably next week's a little busy, so the week of the 8th would be great for me, and I'll sit down with each group and we'll make sure we have what you need and I need to continue the work. The other things that the public is going to see from me is a scorecard of what we're doing with our strategic plan and an annual report each year starting this September. So that's all connected with the work that you guys are doing, so I appreciate it very, very much. We have an SAU board meeting. I know the board members are like, what? It's 10 minutes of 8. It won't last too long, but we're going to take about a 5-minute break. We'll start the board meeting on these tables. You're all welcome to stay, but if not, thank you very much, and I appreciate your help tonight.